Hello, Summoners. This recording was a long time coming, and I really enjoyed it. Since I started listening to this podcast, I've wanted to do an interview with the elusive Ilialader. And you guys have to understand how private he is. He won't even tell me what state he lives in, and the only reason I got his time zone was for scheduling purposes. And so this is a rare opportunity to sit down and really get to pick his brain. I'm talking to you outside this interview just to say that we had so much fun that it wouldn't fit into one podcast, and we had to break it into two. The second part will be coming to you soon, but I hope you enjoy the first part. I say it in the episode, but thank you so much, Ilya, for the opportunity. This was, again, just so much fun. And Ilya has one more message for you if you're wondering why it took him so long to agree to this interview.
Strong and tough is good. I like that. But I'm begging you, don't call me slow.
Hello, Summoners, and welcome to another episode of Phaeology, the study of Fire Emblem heroes. My name is Joel. I'm here with Ilialader, and Summoners, the day is finally here. It is time to talk about the Arden Dissertation. Oh, yeah.
Yay! It's time. This is long overdue.
So, Ilya and I talked a lot about the best way to present this, and we finally settled on an interview format, which means that I finally convinced Ilya that this would work, at which point I ran around trying to figure out how in the world to do an interview.
It was not easy to convince me either, was it? I was quite resistant to this, but, I think it's a good idea.
I think it's going to turn out fantastic, and luckily, my lovely wife has done interviews before, and she gave me the most important tip of all, which is to shut up.
She's the real best phyologist. I'll give her that much. Her and Moon.
Oh yeah, she's fantastic. But the problem is I'm not off to a great start on this. I've already done all the talking.
Pretty much.
So maybe we should get started, and I feel like we need to go a little further back and talk about how long you have been a phaeologist. Do you remember the date of your first episode?
Okay, in my head I thought it was like December 22nd or something like that from 2018. Is that correct?
You're real close. It was December 10th.
I see in the notes now.
What I remember from this is that you didn't introduce yourself at all.
Did I really?
No.
Man, that was such a long time ago.
You finally introduced yourself in March.
It took me until March to introduce myself?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Summoners,
the
I should
first
just preface this by saying Joel is a real trooper here. This guy, for the interview, had to have gone back and listened to all of my early episodes, and boy, they were rough. So we can celebrate Joel's determination, because that's impressive. Even I don't want to go back and listen to those.
Speaking of rough, I have a clip from one of those that I was hoping to share with the Summoners.
Well, I know you're going to do it no matter what I say, so go ahead.
So Phil asked me to kind of write some episodes, script some episodes, maybe
so
do an episode
choppy.
or two. He did convince himself that I was going to be the next. I guess that Phil was just testing to see if I'd be a good fit to take over, and so
I just ignore it.
Is that a landline?
Joel, let me take you down memory lane here. So when I first started doing the show, I recorded every episode in my living room because I just didn't have a dedicated place for it. And that was about 7 feet away from the landline. And it just so happened I got a phone call right then. I was not off to a good start. That's all I'm going to say. It was rough. And for those of you listening at home, the reason Joel pulled this out is because one time we were in a voice call and I got a phone call, and we make fun of Deku for doing that once during an episode, but I was the original one who was made fun of for that. So when he was going back through and listening to them, he was laughing real hard at this phone ringing.
I can't believe that I found that in your introductory episode.
You know what, Joel? I can't believe you found it there either. That's all I'm going to say.
Summoners, there's another important thing here. All right, way back in 2018, these phones, they existed that were plugged into the wall.
Talk about caveman days.
All right, there's an important question I have to ask. Who keeps calling you right when you're recording?
You know what? Would you believe me if I said I don't remember who called me 2 years ago?
I would completely remember that. Or I would completely believe
I don't
that.
remember who called me last night, let alone 2 years ago. Although I actually have my phone by me, so if someone calls me, it's going to be real embarrassing. It's not silent.
I will most certainly keep it in the episode.
No, you wouldn't do that to me. Let's just hope no one calls. No one's calling me. That's the important answer.
So let's bring us back around to Arden. And I am not sure the summoners fully understand how much you love Arden.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great if you could somehow communicate to them in some, I don't know, mystical fashion how much I enjoy him.
Summoners, this might have been my favorite thing to happen in 2020. So we got a special message in the Phaeologist's channel in the Discord, and this is what it sounded like.
Yes! I waited so long. I'm so excited. Let's go. Let's go, Naga. Yes. Our boy's getting some love. I waited 4 years for this. I'm so excited. Woo! All right.
That is
Should put
gold.
Headphone warning in there. But yeah. And you know what, summoners? That was actually a mitigated reaction. That was me toning it down. You're not going to believe me, but I'm being honest. That was me trying to keep a lid on it. I was so excited.
I believe you. I know how much you love Arden. I was there the night that you exploded on Gaia. And I thought this was an important story to tell.
Oh gosh, it took me a moment to process what you just said, because I'm such a chill person. I don't really explode all that much, but now I know where you're going with this, and let's just go. I'm ready for it.
Summoners, don't listen to him. He is not chill. He wants you to think so.
I am so relaxed. You know what, Joel? I took a 6.5 hour long bath today, and to prepare for this, I had some ice cream. I don't know what you're gonna say is more chill than ice cream, but that's my counterpoint. But go ahead.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going. You know, I practiced this in several different voices that could imitate Gaia. And I decided that was a terrible, terrible idea because all of my voices are just horrible. So I'm just gonna read this just as he sent it, because it was really hard to get this out of him. He said, "Okay." In September, I was looking through the Heroic Grail tier list to try and see if we could reorder anyone, since A tier was starting to get crowded. I brought up a couple of ideas on who we could demote from A, and one of those ideas was Arden, seeing as he wasn't exactly amazing at the time.
Might I just say, pause briefly, incorrect. Continue. Oh shoot! I just read the next sentence.
Ilya disagreed pretty hard.
I hadn't read the next sentence yet.
And got into all the reasons why he's still an A-tier unit. Ilya went into great detail on why Arden is actually amazing. One of his biggest points was uniformity in terms of use. Ilya, I love the dig in this next sentence.
It's a little bit of a dig here, but I accept it.
He likes the appeal of not having to guess how to use a unit.
Gaia just loves being on thin ice, doesn't he? He's a glutton for my irritation.
So this all led to I should probably say, now correct me if I'm wrong, but you hadn't slept in like a week.
I had the worst, potentially the worst sleep schedule for any week of my life. And that includes the week I spent mostly in an airplane. I slept horribly this week. I was so sleepy constantly. And I was not in the mood to take this lying down. I was downright militant.
And so on this week of no sleep, you decided to stay up and write the 52-page glorious document that sits before me. And I've read through this a couple times now, and I think this is really, really, really good. If you had to sum it up...
Wait a minute, where'd you get 52 page?
52 page was the number that you quoted me, and I will say that 52 page takes some liberties with font size.
All I'm going to say, it's 61 pages, and that's after I've already converted like the first few like 10 or 12 pages into a slideshow. But I do agree, it is size 24 font. It is not double spaced though. I thought it was double spaced. So really, you should double this. You should call it 122. But yeah, let's move on. I'm ready.
So I'm underselling how many words are in this document. So I know this is difficult, but if you had to sum it up briefly, how would you do that?
To me, the main swing of the Arden dissertation, the thesis as it originally was, is that the way people appraise a unit is really inconsistent between people. And that's because we all have our own unique experiences that to tell us what makes a unit good. And a big one that a lot of people go by is just how the meta is sitting right now. The whole purpose of this was just to remind people that, hey, there is more to units than what, how well they conform to the current metagame, than what's strictly in their stats. And there's just some value to having a consistent play style that doesn't change very much over time. That's like the big portion of this. And obviously I have some gripes about speed and attack, but we'll get to that later.
One of the biggest themes in this whole thing is the benefit of min-maxing. And you have held Arden up as the pinnacle of min-maxing in general.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little more about that?
Well, there's a lot of units in the game who are very well min-maxed. But I feel like Arden has just the overall best embodiment of this because he knows exactly what he wants to do, and you can tell it just by looking at his stat line. I don't actually have it in front of me, but I'm just going to quote it off the top of my head because I'm pretty confident saying this. He has the highest HP in the game at base 60, pretty sure. I believe his defense is 40, which I'm saying because I know he has 100 physical bulk. So that's really high defense, especially for a Gen 1 unit.
It's 41.
41. Didn't I say 41 originally? Pretty sure I did. I think you just misheard me. So he has really, really high HP in defense. I just like to point out this is still the highest HP in the game. This is still the 7th highest defense. He's only 3 points behind the current highest defense unit, who's Gotri.
Yeah, that's correct.
He's not a new. He's an old unit. He's year 1. So despite after all this time, he still has impressive physical bulk, and I really like this unit because when he was released, I was just starting to kind of wrap my head around the whole concept of min-maxing. I was really kind of new to it. When I first started playing Heroes, I barely knew how stats worked. I mean, it took me an embarrassing long time to figure out how IVs worked. I was pretty bad at it. But when Arden came out, I was like, okay, look at this guy. And I saw his stat line. I'm like, okay, this is min-maxed. That's what it means. I understand now. I really liked being able to see a unit and see, okay, this is where he fits. This is what he's supposed to do. And I know he's going to be good at it. And to add to that, I'm pretty sure when he was first released was actually while I was playing Fire Emblem 4 for the first time all the way through. So just a bit of extra connection there.
That's really funny because I didn't understand IVs at all when I first started. I didn't even care about them. I mean, if you summoners remember back in the day, they didn't even mark them. So in order to find out the IVs, you had to go to a weird chart. And
yeah, when I first started playing Heroes, I was mostly just drawn by just characters themselves because obviously I'm a longtime Fire Emblem fan. So my very first summon ever in Fire Emblem Heroes was a 5-star Marth, and I held on to that guy for such a long time. Even though he wasn't very good, I just liked him because, I like Marth, good character, and Arden was the same. I really liked Arden, just not from Fire Emblem 4. From Genealogy, he was terrible. He only ever left my castle once, but in Heroes, I saw him like, okay, this is a unit. This is what I want to use.
Shortly after this whole discussion about dropping Arden a tier, Pawns of Loki comes out, and suddenly high HP is the meta now. Do you feel like Nostradamus?
Yes. I don't know what that means, but yes, I do. I do feel like that. Judging by the way you phrased that sentence, the answer is yes, I do feel that way. I've always thought high HP was good. I mean, it's one of those things where having higher stats, you're always like, okay, this is good. But having higher HP is never a bad thing. Like, it is in every situation. If your HP could be higher, it's good. So I always thought, hey, this guy's got really high HP. We may think of him as being horrible against mages, but he has base 76 magical bulk, which is not the worst. Like, high HP is always good. But especially since Pawns of Loki's come out and everyone's like, hey, this guy will score better than everyone else no matter what. Cool.
He has been fantastic in Pawns of Loki. We have had many conversations on HP, and one of the things we've talked about that's neat is that it is weapon agnostic, as in doesn't matter if you're attacking with a physical weapon or a magical weapon, HP will help you with that.
So that's what that meant. I've been sitting here wondering what on earth that little note meant. I'm like, how's he gonna, like, what does this mean? Now I understand and I agree. HP is great because HP, I shouldn't have said that out loud. HP is great because it increases both your physical and magical bulk. And it's a little bit empty. If you have 1 point of defense, then you don't lose HP. But if you don't have that defense, you will lose HP. It's like you have the same bulk either way, but HP is kind of like, does that make sense? It's like empty bulk.
Yeah.
Like it's there. Yeah, but it doesn't actually stop you from taking the damage. It just lets you survive it better. Point is, HP good.
So you make it very apparent in this dissertation that speed is the absolute worst skill to min-max. Could you talk to us more about that?
Min-maxing a unit is great because it helps you find a niche for them, I believe to quote you on your defensive refines episode, units balanced stat lines are they don't stand out and they don't have a lot of longevity behind them because eventually they'll just kind of be outclassed. But if you have really well min-max stats, you can have a play style where you can stay relevant for longer. And you have real value that'll stay. And I feel like speed is kind of the one stat where that isn't always true. Because when you min-max speed, it works against itself. Do you have a better way of phrasing that? Because you know exactly what I'm trying to say.
It's the only skill that isn't analog. Usually, if you have more attack, you do more damage. But with speed, you've got the whole weird, it's if you're 5 above, then you double. If you have more than 5 above, it's just wasted.
If you go into a fight and you have a lot of speed, that's great. But if your enemy has more speed than you by 5, then congratulations, you just min-maxed a stat that doesn't help you in the slightest. So, yeah, having higher attack is always nice. It always helps you deal more. Having higher defenses help you take less damage. But having higher speed doesn't always help you secure follow-ups. And, let's say you're fighting Arden. Let's say you have 50 speed. That's a lot of kind of pointless speed because you're going to double him no matter what because he's so slow. So heavily investing in speed is nice when you have just enough speed. But once you start having more than enough, you really start getting hurt by how you're pulling stats from other combat needed areas and you're pointing it to speed, which you've already won the speed battle. Or, even worse, when you lose the speed battle, then all your speed does nothing. That's why I feel like min-maxing speed it's just unreliable. So if you're looking for consistent gameplay, highly speed min-max units are not the way to go.
Do you feel like the new damage reduction skills, your spurn, close call, repel, how much do you think they change the game? And just for a quick note there, they changed that speed number from +5. If you're +10 speed, then you get the 40% reduction.
I love spurn and close call and repel. These are some of my favorite B-slot skills in the game. And it's just because of how versatile, how much they do for you. First of all, yeah, they make really, really high speed better. The window between being 5 higher and 10 higher actually does cover a lot of scenarios. So having the extended range for the damage reduction is nice. Having just damage reduction, having speed contribute to your defense is also good because it helps it act in a bit more of an analog way. Even though it isn't obviously the same, it is still it kind of emulates the effect of the other stats, and that's nice. I really, really like these skills, and I don't run them very often, but if I had more copies of them, I definitely would. I love these B-slot skills. They're some of my absolute favorite.
Well, they're hard to get, and honestly, it takes a very specific unit stat line to use them.
It does, and that is another problem. I don't often use those units.
Are those skills enough to help you change your mind on speed min-maxing, though?
They are not. They are not enough to do that, unfortunately. I can't say off the top of my head because I don't use them very much. What kind of inheritance limitations are there for those skills?
Just infantry units.
Infantry only? I thought so. So, yeah. That's a real problem. I mean, hooray for being infantry. You have a lot of exclusive skills, but they do not in themselves make me feel like speed min-maxing is a better idea. And even then, you can use those, but there are other B-slot skills you could run that cover a different set of bases. Like an attack law will lower your enemy's attack and then, vicariously buff your defense. So that's kind of the same.
And a lot more units can use them.
Mm-hmm. Even cavalry can. So that's huge. to answer your question, no, they do not change my mind, even though I like them a ton.
So listen, you've got a story in the dissertation that I just absolutely loved because it illustrates to me the blind spots we often have with units when we don't look at the full picture. And I'm going to stop talking now because I really want you to talk more about this than me. But could you tell us the Carol story?
It was a lovely day back in, I believe, 2017, and I was at an airport, and I was with some family, and I showed my tablet to the person next to me and said, "Hey, go ahead, hit that red orb there, and we'll see who it is." Because of course, we all have fun rituals while summoning. So I shut my eyes. I listened to the smoke. I heard it ring out 5 times. And I looked down, and it was the very first banner where Carl was available. I just summoned him, and I was super excited because all I knew, he was edgy sword boy, and I thought that has to mean he's good. And he had really high speed too. He had a base 35, which when the game first came out, that was a lot of speed. Like, we had very few units who were that competitively fast. And high speed was especially important back in the old days because there's no way to get around it. And even better than that, I sat on him for a second. I was excited, and I went to Game Press, and I looked up his stats, and this was just when I found out what IVs were. And I saw, with much excitement, that my boon I had was speed. Because, I mean, hooray, right? This guy's good because he's fast, and he had a speed boon. He had 38. Joel, do you know how many units when the game first launched had higher than 38 speed?
I only know of one, and that's Long Q.
You know why you only know of one?
Because there's only one.
There's only one unit who had higher than 38 speed when the game first came out, so I was ecstatic. And my excitement was very short-lived because, unfortunately, my Carl was minus attack. And for those of you who have ever wondered why you don't see Carl ever, anywhere, it's because his base attack is only 30. And that's not good. That's not good attack. Even worse than that, he has an attack Super Bane. So here I was sitting with this Lanku who had 38 speed, but only 26 attack. And I was quite disappointed because I was so looking forward to using this guy, and I just had this feeling in my heart that I was never ever going to touch him because he just wouldn't be useful. And unfortunately, that prophecy has come true. My Carl still, his kit is Nameless Blade, Reprisal, Defiant Attack 3, and Desperation. I've almost used him as Desperation fodder before because I just had no reason to use him. He only has 28 hero merit, and I've had him for, almost since launch. He's one of my oldest units. That just shows how little I use him.
Man, that is like Matthew level attack there.
It's so bad. Let's not make Matthew comparisons here. Let's steer clear of that for the Arden Dissertation, please. No, let's not mention that name.
So I heard, or I read this, and immediately I took this as a challenge to build a functional Carol. And so I set about looking at what he has, and I took him and I left him at +0 because no one in their right mind would have anything other than a +0 Carol. And I gave him 15 flowers, Nameless Blade, and his Refine, which is a Quicken Pulse. And then Reposition, Gale Force, Life and Death 4, Lull Speed Defense 3, Defense Smoke 3, and Darting Blow 3 for the seal. So he ends up with this
bit of investment.
I know. You're cringing at the amount of fodder this is. But, so then I gave him the Speed Bane and the HP, or the Speed Boon and then the HP Bane, because obviously it needs the HP Bane. And that leaves him with 50 HP, 56 attack, 48 speed, 23 defense, and 18 res. So obviously this is a Gale Force unit, and the idea is that he has low enough defense and res that whatever he hits will knock him down below 50%, and Wings of Mercy shenanigans can occur. But the real reason I built this unit was I have to ask, is this functional enough for you to consider using Carol again, or possibly for the first time?
Wow. Joel, I know my answer here is probably going to shock you since you've definitely not heard me say it before. But unfortunately, I cannot say I would not consider building this unit. I probably wouldn't even run him if I had him. I'm just sitting here shaking my head that you killed in a green for this. Yeah, you killed in a green for this and didn't even give him like panic smoke. This build is like, it's functional, but I don't really think I can say much more than that because, unfortunately, you really took upon yourself the impossible challenge of making him good, and I think I will have to settle for him being viable. And even then, that's so much fodder. That's you're giving him his refined weapon, Gale Force, Life and Death 4, which is so hard to come by, a lull skill, and 15 dragon flowers, which is a ton of dragon flower investment. I know because I just got done giving like my Arvis 15 dragon flowers and like my fallen Celica. Does she have 15? I think she has 15. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a lot of dragon flowers, and I would not invest that in Kara. The one thing you said that I definitely agreed with was no one in their right minds has more than a +0 Kara.
Well,
that I agree with.
There's one more question here, and it's an important one. Do you think I could con Jackal into picking this unit in the dating game?
We'd have to have some really lackluster builds.
Poor Jackal.
I would probably not say it's possible, but I wouldn't put anything past you. You're quite devious, as this episode has already proven.
So a lot of this conversation centers around power creep and the long-term relevance of units. And I think one of the most interesting things that you pointed out to me, and something that I've really enjoyed digging into, was the high average attack and speed of units compared to other stats.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate more on this?
In my research, I went through and I tried to find out how likely it was when a new unit gets released that they will have sky-high stats per individual stat. I used one of the Fate tools that you suggested, and I found one that let me rank people based on individual stats, and it had alongside it a list of what generation they were. I found in my research that very rarely did units come out who had really, really high resistance or defense, and never, ever did units come out who had really high HP compared to Arden.
Well, let's be clear. 2017 was an amazing year for HP creep.
Ooh, it was incredible, Summoners. The amount that HP went up in a single year is astounding. Let's see, the highest any stat has climbed since Gen 1 is resistance, which has gone up by 6 points since Gen 1, and that's taken 4 years. In 2017 alone, HP grew by 8 points, which is, whew, man, if we got someone with 8 HP higher than Arden nowadays, that would be nuts.
If I had been smarter about the game at the time, I would have been worried about stat power creep for the rest of its history.
Yeah. Well, we've never, ever had a unit push the stat max up by 5 before. So let's see. Base HP in the game was 52, was the highest with OG Hector. And then Zephiel came out, raised it by 3 up to 55. And then Arden came out and raised it by 5 up to 60. So that's crazy if you think about it. If we had that now, we have to get in a unit who had 49 speed at base.
Jeez.
Without a boon, just base 49 speed. That would be wild. I think the most relevant chart that we have on this one are the two bottom ones. I think the one that Gaia did is really nice just for showing kind of how stats interacted. For most of the history of Fire Emblem Heroes, attack has been the most dominant stat as far as having the highest value. Obviously, if you take out HP, because HP is the highest, because 60 is crazy, attack has typically been the highest stat out of the rest of them. It and defense have kind of leapfrogged each other. It is now solidly in the lead. But yeah, I think that's just neat to look at how attack has always been really good. But if you look at what I said, like the thing I talked about earlier was just how many units come out who have really high attack. And I'm moving to the bottom left chart, Joel. It's a chart that talks about how many units have the top 2 of each stat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Basically, the 2 highest values of each stat. Joel went and found out all the people who have them. The 2 highest HP values are 55 and 60, and that is only Zephiel and Arden. Attack has 44 and 45, which is Deginsia and Brave Edelgard at 45, and Valentine's Rudolph at 44. Defense, the 2 highest values are 43 and 44, with Gotri up at 44, and then Brave Edelgard and your Keaton, love the guy, at 43. And then skip 3 or 4 more units, and you get Arden down at 41. That's a range of 4, and it's occupied by less than 10 units. That's really saying a lot for defense and how little it's grown since the game first came out. But I look at Rez, 41, 42. Rodin has 42, and 3 units have 41 Rez. Speed is much worse. So we just got Freya, who has the highest speed in the game at 44. And if you look down at the second highest speed stat, 42, you have a whole 10 units who occupy that spot. That's a lot. If you look at the highest 2 for all the stats combined, there's only 12 units who occupy the 2 highest HP, attack, defense, and res. Speed has 10 alone at 42. That's so many. And if we actually had done this chart before Freya came out, and we had instead done 42 and 41 speed, it'd be much, much worse because there are a ton of units who have 41 speed. Having really, really high speed is very common.
I made this little chart, but this was something that Ilya pointed out to me, and in particular looking at speed. And once he pointed out that how top heavy the speed stat was, I kind of wanted to look at how the other stats fell out. And one of the things that this led to is this next chart, which this was actually, I was talking with some folks about average stats, and they pointed out that looking at how close the average was to the maximum is a really good indication of basically what we're talking about with this with these stats. And that's where we talk about the attack and speed. If you look, and I'm just going to go with book 4, but book 4 is pretty representative of book 1, 2, and 3, and then we're not sure about book 5. But the highest HP is 60. Your average HP is 41.2. And so your average is 69% of the way there to max. If you look at attack, it's 81%. If you look at speed, it's 74. And then defense and res are 66 and 66. But this really illustrates Ilya's point that speed is, compared to the other stats, the average is so much higher. And if you really cherry pick, you can look at the high speed units are all at the same stat, which I thought was very interesting. And I am really glad that you led me down that path.
Yeah. Thank me not sleeping for a week.
Yay, insomnia.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting chart too, because I hadn't actually considered deviation from the average as far as speed goes, but as far as any of the stats go. But I think it's just another way of looking at the same point, and I think it proves it pretty well.
Looking at this chart, I feel like IS has gone player phase heavy.
Absolutely.
Do you see a situation where they could possibly swing it the other way and make more defensive units?
I would love that so much. That the simple fact is player phase is nicer than enemy phase, because in player phase you really hold all the cards. You get to decide how you move all your units, who attacks who. Enemy phase it's all in the computer's hands, unless you know how to manipulate AI really well. But even then, there's only so much you can do. And with you attacking first, you getting to pick, it's so much easier to play the player phase, especially now that IS has for so long put such a big emphasis on you attacking instead of you defending. We used to hear, personally, it's something I thought of just now, was that I used to hear the term like duelist thrown out a lot more often. That used to be a thing, like how well can this unit take hits and then over a prolonged fight get the upper hand by the end. No good examples of this come to mind at the moment, but that used to be a thing. I've not heard anyone comment on dueling in forever, because that's just not the way the game works anymore. It's so player face heavy. So like one engagement and it's over is how the game is focused right now. So having a defensive unit in that kind of metagame is so difficult, because when the whole game is built around, hey, I'm going to beat you and I'm going to do it in one shot, being able to survive that is really difficult. I would love to see IS give us more tools for defensive heroes, so we can get more, away from the one-round meta. I would love to see more people be able to hold their own over prolonged fights. I think that was one of the things I liked the most when the game first came out, was figuring out who could go the longest in engagements and still come out winning.
I agree. I like enemy phase a lot.
And it's funny for me because in actual Fire Emblem, enemy phase is broken. And in actual Fire Emblem, enemy phase is so good. Like, obviously, player phase is when you move and you have to move towards an objective. But being able to take on your opponents in the enemy phase is one of the biggest indicators of how good a unit is. And if they can't really fight enemy phase, a lot of times they're just not very good. But in Heroes, being able to, like, if you can't fight enemy phase, well, then easy. You must just be a attack and speed heavy unit and you're instantly good. Like, it's so opposite for how Fire Emblem usually works. It's so, like, such a weird disconnect for me.
Next time on the Phaeology Podcast, Ilya talks for 300 minutes, Joel throws out random numbers that may or may not apply, and a special surprise? To find out what it is, tune in for the exciting conclusion of the Arden Dissertation.